Hey guys, JannLee here for Game of the Week 5. This is between Mathace and JannLee. It was a game played back in July. Um, this was, I think, from a weekly Crazy House Arena. We had a very interesting game with some interesting middle game ideas, but then also some very sharp play at the end, where mathace later messaged me saying he thought he might have missed a mate. He actually took a while to convince me because I felt black should have been safe, but it seems that he really did miss a mate, and there's a lot of nice lines that hang only by a thread to ensure white's victory. Unfortunately, mathace did miss the mate during the game. Um, but look, let's get into it. Apologies, I've not kept up with the game of the weeks recently. You really should have just one a week, just to get the series back on track. I'm doing a couple at once. So let's get into this. So yeah, a little bit about mathace. I think he's been studying the game quite a lot. In recent months, he's been playing the tournaments very consistently. He's been performing well. He always gives me a tough match. And yeah, particularly the opening, I think he tends to know quite well. And he's been studying that. So, this is your standard e4, e5, four knights with the two bishops out here. And I think we both know quite a few lines here. So I'm actually right now here just trying to get into a line that's maybe less familiar to him if possible. So here, he's delayed castling for just a bit, and he's come out with early bishop g5. I've castled a little bit earlier. h6, queen f6, knight d5, queen g6. Now often, if you've seen this line before, you'll see the queen often goes back here. That's more common where d6 has already been played and blocks off the bishop from e7. Critical thing being, if this pawn is here, then there's only one defender on e7, and knight at e7 becomes a viable fork. When it's been played to a point where white hasn't yet castled and black hasn't yet played d6, queen g6 is sometimes an option, and that's just because you've got two defenders here. This is a bit more active, and in the interest of trying to get my opponent into some unfamiliar line, I'm certainly going to try queen g6. So knight h4, naturally attacking the queen, defending the pawn. And that's just keeping the queen active. You don't want to go back to h7, then you're running into knight at f6. Queen e6 runs into knight c7. Queen d6 isn't great because it blocks the pawn here. So it's actually nearly by deduction. The black queen has to come to g5, but it's good. It still hits the knight, still hits g2, so it's natural. Now queen g4. Here's a move I just did not expect, didn't see coming. I've not seen before. I mean, what I was really expecting was something like knight at f3, which defends the knight, which keeps this intact, and then I just step to h5, which I can now step to because white has no knight in hand to fork the king and queen. And yeah, from here it's a playable game. Where black's probably thinking is maybe some pressure on f2. There's still natural development that can take place here. It's just a game, but it's playable for both sides, I think. Queen g4, I'm not familiar with, and the idea is simply after it takes, knight at f6 becomes an option, which is maybe okay for either side. Yeah, I don't know if taking first is really better, just because it leaves this weakness here to hit. Yeah, so queen g4 is a new one. I don't think it's necessarily decisive. It's just a new idea. And I played bishop f2. Now, maybe I'll play bishop f2 first, just because if you do all the captures first, white ends up with a knight on g4 defending here. But yeah, looking at it now, I'm wondering if queen g4 is so bad, if that needs to be avoided. Before I get into the game, I'm going to have a quick look at what this looks like. You might have queen at g5, which hits both knights, and also gives you plenty of defense. White, of course, can cover it with queen at h3 or queen at g3. Queen at g3, I think black can get another hit here. With d6 then hits the knight again. So, yeah, maybe queen g4 is playable. Let's see what happened in the game. Bishop f2, sacked the bishop. And I suppose the idea was to try to open up the king for a later attack. So now, yeah, after king e1, I think I'm getting what I'm looking for. I think the idea of this trick was to hope for king e1 to get pawn at d2 in. And what that meant is I'd get another attacker on the back rank, so that after all the queen trades occurred, there'd be some back rank activity. What may be most accurate is for white to step to f1. And while that looks dangerous because queen at f2 is a mate threat, after the checks, the knight covers f2. See if there's any difference with the capture here. So yeah, there's a knight in hand now. Pawn at e2. You can't capture it, or else knight d4 will mate because of queen at e2. Come this way, you'll see it's mate. Come this way, it's a nice double checkmate. So key tactical point is white would have to step here, and then the question's if black has something. So maybe queen at f1. Got to rook at g1, d4. Is black actually running out of pieces? Because if black doesn't mate, there's going to be problems back here. I'm just now going to look, see if we don't capture that extra knight, what difference that makes. Yeah, I don't think this is good for black. My thought was maybe black now has time to capture here because there's no weakness there. But white's got two queens in hand and white can sacrifice, which will lead to mate. So okay, there's that's not a direct concern, this pawn at e2 threat. Yeah, which is why I thought king f1 may be slightly better. This is really getting into some fine tactics here. You definitely wouldn't play king e2, you'd lose the queen with check. King e1 was okay, but it allowed pawn at d2. So let's see what pawn at d2 is all about. Now, here the black king can't capture this way, can't go here. And the black king doesn't want to step to d1 or e2 either, because the queen would be lost with check. So king f1 is forced. Now the capture's made, and I decided here just to back off with the king. So mathace has played this. Only difference being now, instead of king f1 straight away, there's now a pawn here, which allows queen at c1. Now that's important because this isn't the easiest thing to block. I mean, if white can't just decide to block here because black can take there's no direct mate threat on this black king. Suddenly rook at e1 is coming in, queen d1 is a threat, so something like queen e2 may not hold. Yeah, how does this progress? I mean, rook at e1 looks natural. And even if there's no direct mate, I mean, black can always just play something like d6. It's threatening to capture here. So it's pretty tough for white here. I mean, if white tries to counter-attack with a rook at h7 threat, you know, maybe that can even be ignored, where black can even just take this, which threatens all the mates in the world. Check here, take. This is no good. Just runs out of steam. If the sack is made here, then go back this way. These are the only checks really available. Yeah, black needs to be a little bit careful. I think white will just run out of pieces. And then eventually there'll be mate waiting at the end of it. Okay, so bishop at d1. Can't block that way. What the other options are, if white captures here, then black gets to convert that pawn into a queen, and that makes a big difference. Sure, white has two queens in hand. Yeah, it is now here. So let's have a look at this for a moment. Now, queen at h7 is a mate threat that black needs to look out for. But black's already making some progress here, converting this queen. So let's see if there's a continuation. So maybe even something like rook at f4 makes sense. Idea being it's simply attacking this knight, which is helping black to get safe from this queen at h7 threat. You can't block with knight f2. So capture, this knight's still on. You put a queen there, you're giving up a fake, you're giving up a real queen for a fake queen. Yeah, maybe it's still a game. The material's balanced here. Yeah, if knight f2, just capture here. Black's comfortable. Yeah, not immediately decisive, but I'd be satisfied with black. I think what white played is the right move, which is queen at d1. And what it does is it just holds on to the material for a little longer by defending the rook this way. But it just allows black to repeat. So black could keep repeating this if required. What I like to do in these situations is cycle just a little bit to try to get a queen in my hand, so that's useful, and to put white's queen in the corner where it's not so useful. And then white only has a rook in hand. So it's at this point I'd probably stop cycling around and try to find another way to progress. So there's no mate threat on my king at the moment. I don't have mate on him, but I need to try to progress in another way. So knight d4 is how I've proceeded. That is one way. d6 was also an option, which looks quite natural because that's hitting the defender of a mate threat. Maybe white needs to cover it up with the knight. But that at least removes it from f6. Here, maybe capture, and queen at f6 picks up one of these two knights. Either white chooses to defend one or defend the other. Sorry, looks like I've just got a connection issue to the website at the moment. Yeah, looks like d6 is playable. I mean, black's got some pieces over this side he needs to activate, or else they don't really count for anything. So we're back online. The other thing was rook at f3, which goes here. But look, it's not decisive either. It's still just a game from here. Still looks playable for both sides. Okay, I played knight d4 instead, which is very direct, looking for queen at e2. But it allows rook at f2 to defend here and also create a bit of pressure here. Now, what I think I was looking to do though was get white to expend this rook, because now rook at d1 is no longer available to defend the queen. So that's the tactical play there. I'm not sure what other alternatives there are. Maybe bishop at f3 is an alternative way. And then here, knight c2 looks very attractive. It hits here and threatens mate there. So after rook at f2, I need to be careful of things that can happen on the back rank as well. Maybe even having said that, let's see if knight takes c2 is actually dangerous, because you may have some neat trick like this. Don't think it works. Oh, maybe it does. Yeah, it does work, possibly. So, rook at g8, king h7, knight f6 will mate. And if king g8, knight f6 doesn't work, but because of king h8, you run out of checks. But knight e7 may come as something. So that's a double check, forcing the king to move. The king goes to h7, bishop at g8 mates with knight g6 to finish. The king goes to h8 first to continue the checks. We take on g6. I take this bishop first. You have more pieces in hand. And now it's a question if bishop at g8 do the job. I think it does, only just. So king takes g6, bishop at f5. So we've cut off the black king from the back. Can't go here because of the knight. Have to go up. And if you come this way, h4, that'll get mated. And g6. No difference if you go this move order first. You'll get shepherded to h4. Pawn at g3. This is how fine. White needs that extra pawn to bring the rook up and deliver mate here. So white would have just enough to checkmate black if black played knight takes c2 all the way back here, which looks really attractive. Now, having said that, we also have to look to see if we know that f takes g6 was getting mated, but there's other lines to look at with king h7. And knight f6. It's looking pretty dangerous for black here. I'd rather be on the white pieces. It's getting mated as well. The last option is king g8, which may end up transposing into some parts of the game. So I may not go into all of this just yet. Let's have a look, see what happened in the game. The queen at c1 was played instead of knight c2, and that big difference there is it's check, basically threatening to win white's queen. Bishop at d1. So I think he's decided if capture, capture, I'd be converting this queen. There's now another queen in hand. Capture, capture. Forces the queen. Is it decisive? Maybe bishop at h5 is pretty solid. Yeah, I think it looks alright for black here. I just feel like black's king's going to be safer in the long term than white's. Even if this is defended, there's d6. I prefer the black pieces here. There's back ranks. White's pieces are a little bit disorganized. But okay, as the game went, mathace decided bishop at d1, and they did go for mate, knight g6 check. Now here, the critical difference is that white has expended this bishop on d1. So at this point in time, f takes g6 is actually safe for black. So after rook f8, capture, rook at g8, again king h7 would get mated by knight f6. We have to take this way. Checks run dry after knight f6, so if white went knight e7. Now, it's important that the black king goes here, so we don't allow white to capture pawns and pieces. The difference is white no longer has a bishop to place on g8, which would have mated black in this situation. The only check that's really dangerous, or not even dangerous, that really goes anywhere is this, and that just white again will run out of pieces. So you can tuck the king away here, and then it's all over because the checks have run out and black has too much material. So that's the fine line difference by queen at c1 and queen takes a1 as winning. And I'll be honest, here I let my guard down. I just thought, oh look, black's picked up the material here, this is a threat, queen at e1's a threat, it's all over, there shouldn't be anything on the king. Now in fact, f takes g6 is necessary here to avoid being mated. And quite casually, I just quickly move the king to g8. And we'll play through the game here, but it may surprise you to know that the black is in fact mated from this position by force. And that's one of the key points that I'm going to go through in this game. If you think I haven't made a key point already, this is actually the critical position. I'll go through what actually happened in the game where the attack continued like this, and the pieces just dried out for white. Unfortunately, there the checks have run out, and white resigned. But it was later mathace came back to me saying, "I think I've missed a mate," and I said, "Oh no, I think black was pretty safe there." So let's go through it. Knight f6 is actually correct. That forces g takes f6, and that forces king g7. And now here, what was played was knight h5, where after king g6, things run out. So rook f6 is a possibility. You can't play king g5 because of h4. So white would have to defend this by coming back here. Pawn at g6 is no good. Checks just run out. Oh, we can go back here even. yeah, there's rook f7, pawn g6, but then it's check. Sorry, so that doesn't even help. Let's not forget, you can't move things if they don't get out of check. So yeah, this way is no good, and the critical thing is the placement of this knight. Now let me just recount exactly what makes the difference. It's been a while since we went through all the lines, but it was actually the move knight e8, I believe, which is the critical move here. And you'd look at this and go, well, hang on, white's still tied down. He's got a pawn in hand. He's got two knights that are under attack and limited resource on f7. How could this possibly be winning for white? How could it? So let's go through all the different variations. So let's start with the obvious one. If you capture the knight, now that allows rook takes f7. King can't go back. Has to go forward because that's mate. So the king would have to run up. So white's nearly run out of pieces here. But pawn at h5. This bishop, while pinned, is still useful for attacking against the king because the king can't take it. We'd have to come up here. And believe it or not, there you have mate with white's last bit of resource. Has lost all the knights, but still found mate with a couple pawns on the side here. So that's the first thing. The knight on e8 can't be captured. Let's have a look at king takes g6, because that's the other obvious one. Well, what if we capture another piece? And even here, I think a strong player will look at it and go, yeah, that doesn't look like there should be mate here. Now, the key difference is the placement of this knight on e8. It still defends the same squares, but it's different to the knight that was here on h5, also covering the same squares. Largely because it frees up this h5 square for white to put a pawn on. Now, it's not useful just yet, because, again, the checks would run out. So that's not the key. The key here is white can first capture on f7. Now running up's no good for the same reason h4 gets mated. If you ignore the capture, white gets mate with pawn at g6 and pawn at g7, which is also just enough. So black has to capture. But it's now here that pawn at h5 becomes relevant because there's no knight there. And the king can't come up here, we've got the same mate. The king would have to come back. And here's a critical point, rook f7 is now check, winning the rook at the same time. So white's acquired the piece. If the black king steps here, rook g7, and you get a back rank mate with the two rooks. If the black king steps here, we play rook h7 and knight f6. Okay. A block is no better. That just gets mated as well. So there's the critical point. Rook f7 check, which is aided by pawn at h5. And with the knight being on e8, it all holds together only because it can't be captured because of the mates that occur this way or this way. Okay, but I haven't been through all the variations yet. I've just been through the obvious captures. So we already know rook takes e8 is no good and king takes g6 is no good. There are other options. So the other options are king g8, king h7. They're the only other two options that black has. So let's explore king h7. Now against this one, now white still has to be very accurate here. We've got to take this. Now that's check. If the black king goes back to, if it goes to h8, you've got pawn at g7, rook at h8. If the black king goes this way, then knight f6 will mate. So there'll be a mating net around this side. So that's all fairly straightforward. So we have to take the knight. And then rook f7 looks natural. Although it may not be required. We may just be able to play knight f6. So king h8, no good. The rook will mate either here or here. King g7, no good because of rook at g8. So we've got to go to here. And that's where pawn at h5 stings us again. If you go back, rook at g8, you go forward, h4. So king h7, no good either. So the last resource is king g8, which is basically where we were before. So knight f6 would be repeating. So let's see if there's better for white. So here's where I'm thinking pawn h7 still working. The only difference here is white has one less pawn. That could actually be critical though. Before I go down this path, let me just have another close look at king g8. I was looking at bishop f7 as well to see if that came of anything. It's close, but it doesn't quite work. So bishop f7, pawn at h7. This looks like it achieves safety for black, because rook f8 is not mate because of bishop f8, knight f6. King f7 might be in trouble. Thought we'd figured out all these lines, but they're not all clear. King g7 just repeats. King g6 gets mated with pawn at h5. So at least looks repeating. If you go here, check. Just wondering if black gets to run free. Yeah, it's not easy to now net black. Certainly checks, but something like this would be safe for black. Okay, so let's have a look. So if king g8, what's the key move here? Is it pawn h7? I feel like we'd be short a pawn. So let's go back over these lines. The key difference now being we're one pawn less. So if the king goes to h8, we play rook h7 first. This seems to run. We've got this one, rook f7. So let's look at that again. King h8, rook h7. That was all forced. King g8, f7. We've got mate there, which would mean king g8. We still have knight f6, which works. So we'll go back to bishop takes f8, and now I'm wondering if white has enough, because the difference here was after king g6, white needed a pawn to put on h5. This bishop can't move. Can't just grab it from here because the black king runs free. So I'm wondering if white needs to gather more resource and capture on f7. Now, king moving is no good. That gets mated. King going here is no better. That also gets mated. So you've got block and you've got king coming up. So if the king comes up, that is also no good because of this. Now got this pawn in hand from taking on f7. So we need to block. Now after the block, knight f6 check. King can't come back, has to come up. Bishop covers here. Check. And rook at g4 mates. If you wanted to be elegant, you could play h4 and knight d5, double check, force the king here. But you don't need points for elegance. Rook at g4 is sufficient. So that's, yeah, the last critical piece is rook here. I suppose I just need to check if knight at g7 has a difference, only because it defends h5. That can sometimes be critical. Because you might think, well, are you being pedantic about that? But it actually does matter. This can't be captured. And that can be the slightest difference between a win or a loss here. Because if white can't find mate here, and I think white's actually starting to struggle, blocking on the knight can be all the difference at the high level games. But pawn at h5 isn't the only option. There's pawn here. There's also rook g7. Let's have a look at both. So in fact, rook g7 looks promising. If the knight's taken, knight at e8 mates in 1. If takes here, then we get rook at f7. And now there's no knight on g7 covering pawn at h5. So yeah, we will need to play this elegant looking mate now. So the other option is bishop takes g7, which I think runs into pawn at h5. Nicely cuts off the king, going backwards, and h4 mates again. But yeah, it all hangs by a thread. All these tactics only just hold, and there's only just enough material. And I think the finest line is this one, where yeah, you actually need to use every resource, make the king with rook h3 at the end. Alright, so I think I've exhausted all the lines there. It's been quite a lengthy continuation here, but you can see the only difference was knight e8, and I'll tell you at a glance, most strong players looking at this would just go, yeah, there's no way white has enough material to finish. I certainly felt that way. It took mathace many messages to convince me that it was actually mating in every variation from here. But yeah, I think this is a nice game to show how fine the tactics are in this. Sometimes when you watch a high-level game, if you're a novice player, you'll just think that the attacking player had it the whole time. This really shows how close it is either way, and how far you can stretch each other on resources. So yeah, key difference in this game being that unfortunately mathace went with knight h5. And then the tactics just don't work out because here the critical move was pawn at h5, where the knight was on e8 instead. So without that resource, pawn at f5 was the only good check. And then white ended up losing a game which looked like it was winning. Mind you, the key mistake here is I've actually, after queen takes, it's still winning for black. It's just after knight g6. I didn't notice in the game that the bishop was defending f8 and moving quickly. And after this, it's one for white, but after this, it's a clear win for black. Let's repeat this line. Critical bit coming to h7, so that knight g6 isn't an immediate check. Alright, well, hope you enjoyed that game. I certainly did. There's a lot, all the way from the opening to middle game, the finesse on pawn at d2, motifs out to a1. I think this is really a good model game to go through a lot of the finer details that are not obvious in Crazy House. So hope you enjoy this. Let me know your feedback. I'll be trying to revive the Game of the Week series and actually have it come at a frequency of weekly rather than monthly or quarterly. So yeah, I'm on holidays till next week. Hopefully things resume as they were with streaming. I haven't been playing in the tournaments regularly. But look, I'm going to go keep enjoying my holiday. Hope you're doing well where you are, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.